What if I told you that the very freedom you cherish most is the seed of your own enslavement? That democracy, the system we've been taught to worship as the pinnacle of human civilization, contains within itself a fatal flaw that transforms liberty into chains. Plato saw it coming 2,400 years ago, and watching our world today, it's terrifying how right he was. We live in an age where we celebrate choice above all else. We can choose our leaders, our beliefs, our identities, our truths. We scroll through infinite options. We vote with our wallets and our ballots. We proudly declare that we are free. But Plato would look at our modern world and ask a single devastating question. Are you choosing, or are you being chosen? Because there's a difference between freedom and the illusion of freedom, and that difference is the abyss into which democracies fall. In Book 8 of the Republic, Plato lays out a prophecy that reads less like ancient philosophy and more like a documentary of our current moment. He describes a cycle, an inevitable progression through which governments rise and fall. And at the heart of this cycle sits democracy, beautiful and chaotic, loved by the masses, yet fatally flawed. According to Plato, democracy doesn't fail because of external enemies or economic collapse. It fails because of what it becomes. It fails because the very freedom it promises becomes so absolute, so unrestrained, that it devours itself and gives birth to its opposite, tyranny. Think about that for a moment. The system designed to give you voice, to protect your autonomy, to ensure your participation in the collective destiny, contains within itself the mechanism of its own destruction. It's like a beautiful flower that blooms so fully it exhausts the soil beneath it and withers into something unrecognizable. This isn't just ancient theory. This is a pattern that has repeated itself throughout history, from Athens to Rome, from revolutionary France to the fragile democracies crumbling around us today. And the most unsettling part, most people don't see it happening until it's too late. Plato's critique of democracy begins with a simple observation. When you give everyone equal say, you create a system where no one truly leads. Democracy, he argued, is ruled by the many, but the many are not wise. They are not trained in the art of governance. They do not understand the complexities of justice, and they are easily swayed by emotion, by spectacle, by whoever tells them what they want to hear. In a democracy, the loudest voice often wins, not the truest. The most charming candidate often prevails, not the most qualified. And this creates a profound problem, because a state without genuine leadership is a ship without a captain, drifting toward whatever rocks the current favors. But Plato's concern went deeper than mere incompetence. He understood something fundamental about human nature. We are creatures of desire. We want comfort, pleasure, recognition, security. And in a democracy where the people hold the power, politicians don't lead the people, they follow them. They don't challenge the masses to become better. They pander to what the masses already want. They promise more freedom, more wealth, more entertainment, more of everything, because that's how you win votes. The democratic system incentivizes leaders to become flatterers, to tell beautiful lies rather than hard truths. Imagine a doctor who, instead of prescribing the medicine you need, simply gives you whatever you ask for, because that's how he keeps you as a patient. You want painkillers? Here's a lifetime supply. You want to ignore your symptoms? No problem. That's not healthcare. That's enablement. And that's what Plato saw happening in democracy. The state becomes a marketplace of desires, where politicians compete to offer the most attractive illusions, and the people, drunk on promises, forget to ask whether any of it is real or sustainable. This is where things get truly uncomfortable, because as democracy matures, as freedom becomes absolute, something strange happens. People begin to lose their sense of limits. In a healthy society, there are boundaries, hierarchies, structures that provide meaning and order. But in Plato's democratic state, all these boundaries dissolve. Teachers fear their students, parents fear their children, old traditions are mocked, wisdom is dismissed as elitism, and everyone believes their opinion is as valid as everyone else's, regardless of knowledge or experience. It sounds liberating at first, doesn't it? No more oppressive hierarchies, no more gatekeepers telling you what to think. But Plato saw that when all boundaries disappear, when all authority is questioned, when all structures crumble, people don't find freedom. They find chaos. And chaos is exhausting. Living in a world without structure, without clear direction, without anyone willing to make hard decisions and take responsibility, it wears on the soul. People begin to feel anxious, unmoored, desperate for something solid to hold on to. The absolute freedom that once felt exhilarating now feels like drowning in infinite choices. And in that desperation, in that collective exhaustion, the people begin to crave something they once rejected. A strong hand. Someone who will cut through the noise, someone who will make the chaos stop, someone who will promise order and deliver certainty. This is the moment when democracy transforms into tyranny, not through violence or invasion, but through invitation. The people themselves, tired of too much freedom, willingly surrender it to whoever promises to make them feel safe again. If this pattern sounds familiar, it should, because we're watching it unfold in real time, across the globe, in nation after nation. We're seeing democracies slowly sleepwalking toward authoritarianism, and the most disturbing part is how many people are cheering it on. We're seeing leaders rise to power by promising to restore order, to silence the voices that confuse us, to simplify the complexities that overwhelm us. They promise to build walls, to identify enemies, to crush opposition, to make decisions on our behalf so we don't have to carry the burden of freedom anymore. And we applaud. We vote for them. We surrender our liberty piece by piece because somewhere deep down we've become exhausted by the responsibility that true freedom demands. Plato understood that the tyrant doesn't usually arrive wearing a crown and declaring himself dictator. He arrives as a champion of the people. He emerges from the chaos of democracy, claiming to represent the common citizen against the elites, the corrupt, the complex systems that have failed everyone. He speaks the language of populism, of simplicity, of us versus them. He promises to drain the swamp, to fight for the forgotten, to restore greatness. And the people, so desperate for someone who seems to understand their pain, overlook the warning signs. They don't notice when he begins to consolidate power, when he attacks the free press, when he dismisses judges and institutions that constrain him, when he surrounds himself with loyalists rather than experts. By the time they realize what he's become, it's too late. The tyrant has arrived, and he arrived because democracy invited him in. But here's where Plato's insight becomes even more profound and perhaps more painful. The tyrant isn't just enabled by the people's exhaustion, he's also shaped by it. Plato describes the tyrant as a soul completely enslaved to his own desires. He is someone who has no internal restraint, no moral compass, no genuine concern for others. He wants only power, only adulation, only the satisfaction of his endless appetites. And the tragic irony is that the tyrant who appears to be the strongest figure in the society is actually the most enslaved person in it. He is a prisoner of his own desires, constantly anxious, constantly paranoid, constantly needing more control to feel secure. The man who rules everyone is ruled by his own fears. This is the final devastating twist in Plato's analysis. Democracy collapses into tyranny, and tyranny turns out to be the ultimate form of slavery, not just for the citizens, but for the tyrant himself. The quest for absolute freedom leads to absolute bondage. The rejection of all authority creates the conditions for the worst authority. The unwillingness to be governed by reason and wisdom results in being governed by fear and force. It's a tragic cycle, and Plato saw it as almost inevitable unless people were willing to do something radical, cultivate wisdom, embrace self-discipline, and recognize that true freedom isn't the absence of all constraint but the presence of inner order. If this resonates with you, if you're starting to see the patterns Plato warned about manifesting in our world, then you're beginning to wake up to a truth that most people remain blind to. And there's so much more to explore on this journey of understanding. Subscribe to this channel, because what we're uncovering here isn't just philosophy, it's a map for navigating the chaos of our times. But before we get to solutions, we need to understand something even deeper about why democracy is so vulnerable, something about human nature itself that Plato grasped better than almost anyone. The core of Plato's criticism rests on his understanding of the human soul. He believed that within each person there are different parts competing for control. There's the rational part that seeks truth and wisdom, the spirited part that seeks honor and achievement, and the appetitive part that seeks pleasure and satisfaction. In a healthy soul, reason rules over the other parts, guiding our desires toward what is truly good, rather than what merely feels good in the moment. But in democracy, Plato argued, the appetitive part is celebrated and unleashed. Democracy tells us that all desires are equally valid, that we should pursue whatever makes us happy, that we deserve to have our every whim satisfied. It's a philosophy of you do you, taken to its logical extreme. And at first, this feels wonderful. Liberation from old constraints, permission to be ourselves, affirmation of our individual choices. But Plato saw that when appetite rules over reason, when immediate gratification becomes the highest value, people become increasingly unstable and unhappy. We become like children in a candy store, gorging ourselves until we're sick, then wondering why we feel empty. We chase pleasure after pleasure, purchase after purchase, experience after experience, and find that none of it delivers the lasting satisfaction we crave. We become addicted to novelty, to stimulation, to the next thing that promises to fill the void. And a society full of such people is not free. It's enslaved to its own desires, manipulated by whoever can promise the next fix. This is where modern consumer democracy reveals itself as the fulfillment of Plato's prophecy. We live in societies that claim to maximize individual freedom, but what we've really maximized is individual consumption. We're free to buy, to choose between brand A and brand B, to customize our experiences, to curate our identities. But are we free to opt out? Are we free from the constant pressure to want more, to be more, to achieve more? Are we free from the algorithms that track our every move and feed us content designed to keep us scrolling, buying, clicking, engaging? We call ourselves free, but we're performing a script written by systems we don't control and barely understand. The democratic citizen, in Plato's view, becomes like a ship tossed by every wave, having no internal anchor, no guiding star. Today, we might call this being extremely online, being buffeted by every trending outrage, every viral moment, every new crisis demanding our emotional investment. We're outraged today, inspired tomorrow, devastated the next day. And through it all, we're exhausted. We're living in a state of constant reaction, never pausing long enough to ask whether any of this is helping us become wiser, more virtuous, more genuinely happy. The democratic promise was that we would govern ourselves. But instead, we're governed by whatever captures our attention, and attention has become the most valuable currency in the world. Here's what Plato understood that we've forgotten. Freedom without wisdom is just chaos with good PR. Real freedom, the kind that actually makes human life flourish, requires cultivation. It requires education, not just in facts, but in character. It requires learning to distinguish between what we want and what we need, between temporary pleasure and lasting fulfillment, between the voice of appetite and the voice of reason, Plato believed that democracy would fail because it treats all opinions as equal, all desires as valid, and all choices as equally good. But they're not. Some paths lead to human flourishing, and others lead to destruction. Some leaders are wise and virtuous, and others are demagogues and tyrants. Some uses of freedom build us up, and others tear us down. Democracy, in refusing to make these distinctions, in celebrating diversity of opinion above the pursuit of truth, creates the conditions for its own collapse. But what does this mean for us, living in democratic societies today, watching the patterns Plato described playing out in real time? Does it mean democracy is hopeless, that we should abandon it for some other system? Plato certainly thought so. He advocated for rule by philosopher kings, by the wise few who had transcended their own appetites and could see clearly what was good for the whole. But we know how that story tends to end too. Concentrated power, no matter how wise the original vision, tends to corrupt. The enlightened dictator becomes the tyrant eventually. So we're left with a paradox. Democracy contains the seeds of tyranny, but alternatives to democracy tend to produce tyranny more directly. Maybe the answer isn't to abandon democracy, but to transform our understanding of what democracy requires to survive. Perhaps Plato's critique isn't a death sentence, but a warning label. Democracy can work, but only if its citizens are educated in virtue, only if they cultivate wisdom, only if they're willing to do the hard work of governing themselves internally before attempting to govern collectively. The problem isn't democracy itself. It's that we've created democracies filled with people who have never been taught how to be free in any meaningful sense. We've created systems that maximize choice while minimizing wisdom. We've built societies that celebrate individual rights while neglecting individual responsibilities. We've designed economies that profit from our appetites while starving our spirits. And then we wonder why our democracies feel fragile, why authoritarianism tempts us, why we're so willing to trade freedom for the promise of security. Plato saw this coming because he understood that external political systems are always reflections of internal psychological states. A democracy full of people enslaved to their desires will inevitably produce tyranny. But a democracy full of people who have learned to govern themselves, who have cultivated reason and virtue, who can distinguish between true freedom and mere license, such a democracy might actually survive. This is the secret that changes everything, the insight that most people never grasp. The political is personal. The state of your nation reflects the state of your soul. If you want to save democracy, you have to start by saving yourself from the tyranny of your own unexamined desires. You have to become the kind of person who can handle freedom without being destroyed by it. You have to cultivate the wisdom to see through demagogues, the courage to defend truth even when it's unpopular, and the self-discipline to choose the good over the merely pleasant. This is what Plato was really advocating for. Not rule by philosopher kings imposed from above, but the cultivation of the philosopher within each citizen. And here's the beautiful, terrible truth. This work is available to you right now. You don't need permission from anyone to begin examining your own soul, questioning your own desires, and cultivating your own wisdom. You can start today in this moment by simply asking yourself, what am I enslaved to? What desires rule me? What voices do I listen to without questioning? Where have I surrendered my capacity for independent thought in exchange for the comfort of belonging to a tribe, an ideology, a predetermined set of answers? These questions are uncomfortable because they reveal how unfree most of us actually are. But they're also liberating because once you see your chains, you can begin to break them. Plato believed democracy ends in tyranny, but perhaps it only ends in tyranny when we refuse to do this inner work. Perhaps the cycle can be broken, not by changing systems from the outside, but by changing ourselves from the inside. Perhaps the revolution we need isn't political but spiritual, a mass awakening to the reality that we've been sleepwalking toward the very thing we fear most, and that the only way to stop it is to wake up. So here's my challenge to you. Don't just watch this video and move on. Don't just nod along and then go back to scrolling, consuming, reacting. Take Plato's warning seriously. Look at your own life, your own choices, your own relationship with freedom and desire. Ask yourself honestly, am I living as a free person? Or am I enslaved to systems and appetites I don't control? And if the answer disturbs you, good. That disturbance is the beginning of wisdom. That discomfort is the first step toward genuine freedom. Democracy doesn't have to end in tyranny, but it will unless enough people wake up and do the hard work of becoming wise, virtuous, and genuinely free. The tyrant is always waiting in the wings, ready to step forward the moment we grow too tired, too confused, too desperate for someone else to make our decisions for us. But he only gets his moment when we give it to him. The power is still ours. The question is whether we have the wisdom and courage to use it well. If this message resonates with you, if you feel the call to become more than just a passive citizen in a decaying democracy, then share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Like it, comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel because this conversation is just beginning. We're going to explore what it really means to be free, how to cultivate wisdom in an age of information overload, and how to build a life worth living in the midst of civilization's chaos. Plato gave us the warning. Now we get to decide whether we'll heed it or repeat the cycle once more. The choice, terrifying and beautiful, is yours.